I guess it's a good place to start. The last presentation was on data, and I think just to frame the context around kind of what we've done, trending back from the Mail Online to Local World into Trinity Mirror, and most of my career is focus on the growth of data. Interestingly, there is now more relevant data and fresh data about every single one of us online than offline. So our data is traversing through loads of systems and servers and clouds, Amazon, Google, from our mobile phone devices. And just as marketeers, we're mostly interested in how that data is used for advertising purposes. But it's, I guess it's quite an overwhelming thought to think that everything we do is digitized, so it can be traced and you can look for patterns. So there's international corridors these days with our data. There's nothing to say that a data point that we're collecting right now from some city like Washington that gives us real intelligence on a person sitting on their personal computer is going to be delayed in any way because of the developments in technology. So in our DMP, for instance, we can right now target that person in real time. I think that's fascinating, not just for advertising, but for everything that we're going to see over the next decade in technology. The way I like to describe, or I've been thinking about programmatic and digital, is as a gold rush. I think that we've got a situation where lots of developments were made in digital. I don't think it's fully evolved yet, and lots of money was just pushed into that kind of ecosystem, which created, of course, fraud, lots of nefarious kind of techniques and methods to take that money out because of the lack of auditing. I'd argue there's still a massive gap in the audit that takes place with digital. And all these main agencies, they all partake in this process. And I think programmatic has really magnified the gold rush feeling, because right now, we're talking about brands that have a legacy over 150 years. The investment that they see from an advertiser boils down to a single auction, and it's about who pays the highest price, which means that we can't forecast. We have no real foresight or clairvoyance or way of measuring whether we'll survive, whether our price is going to change in the future, yet we're expected to produce really trustworthy and premium content. So I'm one that advocates a drastic change in how our programmatic execution takes place right now. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but if it doesn't, our future could be quite grim. Our strategy, which I don't feel is a threat anymore to share, it was a long-term plan. The reason for that is because header bidding has changed everything. Was initially to concentrate our inventory into a controlled supply. And we chose a few platforms, and we never liked to move our inventory out of those platforms, except if there was a yield basis. So we weren't averse to networks. If they could guarantee us a yield, we could work with them. And in this way, you can control the volume of inventory at which price going out of your ad server. And many of the partners we work with have observed the strength of our yields. You see that, and it's documented. And that's because we pursued this long-term strategy. I think we also concentrated our data, so we were very protective over that. Can't remember who all the sponsors are, but some of the companies in the market right now, they take your data and they profit off your data because they repackage it and sell it into the agencies, into client direct as well, when actually they're making your audience work for them, which I believe we should be doing ourselves. And also, we didn't take a kind of multi-platform approach either. Not end-to-end, but also not oversaturated. And the reason for that is because I think the strategy for a long-tail website is very different to the strategy for a tier one website that has a brand and has a content kind of approach to selling their media. So you want to be careful not to kind of a long tail your business by putting on multiple partners with loads of entry points and then expecting to keep your brand investment high. I think programmatic has some initial players, and this market is shifting. For me, I feel that I've put the leaders in these certain areas. Google AdWords obviously is a leader. I think that they haven't done really well on apps or innovated enough in that area. I think their business is at risk, not entirely, but there is an opportunity in that market, I believe. Facebook are obviously capitalizing off of that. Facebook is growing massively, kind of rules the social media ecosystem. We still work with both these partners, and they're massive investors in our media. Rubicon, I think they are probably one of the most important programmatic players that has come in our industry. They did a lot and educated everybody in programmatic. Their PR was amazing. I learned a lot about programmatic from Rubicon several years ago. But desktop is dying, and that way of consuming media on direct desktop traffic is not sustainable, especially for news publishers. So we're finding ourselves that we have to change the way that we drive our sale away from desktop and into mobile, and we're giving it a really strong audience leverage. And AppNexus has helped us massively with that. And then obviously in video, apart from YouTube, we see AOL doing a really good job in the market as a video solution to the agencies, but I think there is an opportunity beyond them as well. Now I want to talk about, I guess, what some of the issues are for news publishers. We really only have one opportunity on the phone where to monetize, and that's when obviously people read news. And in that, it gets more complex because the way in which you can consume news on a mobile device is not just in your browser, it's inside an app. So we've got a situation where if that is not in a Safari or an Opera browser, for instance, we are actually limited in the controls we have in how we sell that media. So this was a great slide. I've got to be honest. I nicked the idea from somebody and I've adjusted it myself. And I think the biggest issue we have is aligning our mobile revenues with the kind of investment required to produce strong editorial content. So there's a massive kind of legacy around negotiating prices with ad agencies. Is it a decent price or is it really cheap? But for news publishers, I think if you look at these sort of verticals of consuming news, they don't all give us the access required to monetize, and some of them sell our content or even use our content to supply themselves for impressions. So with Safari, we obviously have control. I'd argue that we don't have control with Facebook, nor Twitter, Pinterest, LinkedIn. Google AMP is helping us, but Apple News, they closed iAd, and they've just boosted the traffic to their newsstand massively by a change in iOS, and yet they have no, I mean, we met them, and they really haven't even thought about how they're going to monetize it, and we're not allowed to do it, so it's a real issue. So when you're next time negotiating with an ad agency, I think it's not about decent pricing or cheap pricing, and it's about decent pricing or non-existence. We won't exist. It is actually as bleak as that. So I don't want to end on a kind of dark, depressing note. I think there is some opportunities for us. The biggest focus, in my opinion, is video. I think that we can really help ourselves if we can bring our yield up to not entirely replenish or fill the missing print revenues that we're experiencing as news publishers, but definitely help. And so I gave you a taste of what I thought was the kind of the strategy that we pursued in the past, which has changed because of header bidding, and what we'll be doing in the future. And it looks like this. I think those look like mugshots, actually, but they're two important people to me and to our strategy. Index Exchange have done a great job of evangelizing header bidding in the market and standardizing the implementation. I think header bidding for video could be really interesting, and getting that in a horizontal, a non-waterfall environment is something that I know Sky and etc. people like that are looking at. We are as well. And if we can produce enough content, then there is an opportunity to drive our revenue up. And that's why I think Suggestive is another interesting platform. It allows us to drive, on the first instance, a semantic analysis of our web pages and our articles and scan our video library for a relevant video. And I think if you mix that with the idea that, for instance, the Telegraph produce 1,000 articles a day, but only 40 videos, and it's not rocket science why that's probably not producing the revenue that they anticipated. It's very expensive to produce video content. And the second thing that Suggestive gives us is what they're calling a kind of content exchange, or Delta, where we can share video content between news owners and not limited to news owners. So I think that's a really inspiring vision of the future. And I've put a kind of map of how I see that working, and not to get too technical, but if we have an ad server and it can be freewheel to DFP, you need the VMAP file, and you just have to work out where the pods are and put the highest pricing ad in the right place. And if you've got the right content going with it that's brand safe and voluminous, then I think you've got a really good solution. So, thank you.